The reason you remember the past isn't to make an objectively accurate record of the past. It's so that you can use the information in the past to prepare you for the future. And your mind won't leave you alone unless that has happened. So if you've encountered something that's negative and you don't know why and you don't know what to do about it if that happens again in the future, then that will stay with you. And I think one of the things it does too is it increases your overall physiological load. Because if everything that you've done has resulted in catastrophe, then you're somewhere insanely dangerous and you should be like a prey animal that's ready to dart in any direction. And so you can go back and you can find out where you have holes in the structure through which you're viewing the world. That's one way of looking at it. And you can sew those things up. And that's in some sense, that's what you're doing in psychotherapy. Partly it's exposure to things you're afraid of and disgusted by and are likely to avoid. That's a huge chunk of it. But if you go back into your past and you start talking those things through, it's really the same thing. Freud, of course, was always, when he was doing his free association process with his clients, he'd find that if he just let them talk, that their speech would circle until it hit a place like that, where they were confused and doubtful. And then their speech would sort of wander around that, and then they'd have an emotional expression that was a consequence of that. He thought the emotional expression was what was curative. It was cathartic in his terms. But later, James Pennebaker, he found that if you brought college students into the lab and you had them write for 15 minutes 3 times over 3 days about the worst thing that had ever happened to them, or the worst thing they ever did, if I remember correctly, they got worse in the short term but better in the long run. For example, they went and visited the doctor less and markers of their physical health improved because they basically calmed down. Once they had gone through the negative memory and sorted it out properly and told a properly articulated story and figured out how to deal with it, then their physiology calmed down. And so then they weren't as stressed, they weren't producing as much cortisol, and so cortisol suppresses your immune function, and so they were more likely to stay healthy.